today we're going to connect the ADP3450 to the internet using a wireless dongle, and it means that we can connect to it from anywhere around the world and run tests from anywhere around the world and get the results remotely as well. So the first thing we're going to do is to turn the ADP3450 on into Linux mode, which we've done in a previous video. I'll put a link to that video in the description. And then we're going to find the device. If you're on a Mac or Linux, it will look like this. And we can find the device listed here. And then we can use screen to connect to that device on this baud rate of 115200. If we're on Windows, we're going to use the device manager like we did in the previous video to find the COM port for the ADP3450. And then we're going to use PuTTY to connect to that with the same baud rate of 115200. When you connect, you might need to hit enter to get to the first prompt. And the login is Digilent, and the password is also Digilent, very secure. Well, we're going to change that in a little bit. First thing we do is an IPL. This will list the interfaces that are available. So the network interfaces we have here are the loopback interface or the local interface, and this ETH0, the Ethernet port as well. Don't worry too much about this for the moment. So if I plug in the wireless adapter, I plug it into the bottom left port of the ADP3450, and we'll see that it recognizes it as a device and has renamed this interface from WLANO to this unique name that identifies that specific interface. We do an IPL, we'll see that it's listed there now as a new device. To set up a new network connection, we're going to need to go into super user mode and type in the password of Digilent, because we can't do that from a standard Digilent user. We need to be a root user. So now we need to set some variables. So we're going to set firstly the wireless interface name to be the same name. Next, we're going to do the WXSID, which is just another word for the network name. So I've renamed my network, my ADP Wi-Fi, and then we can set the password as well to be my ADP Wi-Fi pass. Next, we need to use a WPA passphrase command. Right, this generates a config file that we can use by the ADP to connect to this Wi-Fi network. We're going to pass in the name of the WXSID and the wireless password as well. And if we hit enter on this, you will see that it gives out a configuration file with the correct PSK saved, so it can authenticate correctly. Now we're going to want to save this into a file, so we can run the same command here and just use the arrow to point to the file atc/wpa_supplicant. And we're going to create a new file called wpa_supplicant- and give it the wireless interface name. We do the $, but this time inside curly braces. And we're going to put a .conf at the end. So that's just created this file here, and we can look at the contents of that, and it should be exactly the same as what we've just run before. And you can see here that it's changed out the name of the wireless network name to be the same as what we set up here. Next, we need to create a service to connect to this network using the configuration file. So we can do systemctl enable WPA_supplicant. And then we can give it the wireless network name by specifying an @ symbol. And then we give it the wireless interface and put .service on the end. And then we can start the service, and we should see in just a moment that it changes to becoming a ready link. And we can see that it's authenticated as well to the network that we specified. So if we hit enter and go back to our prompt, this time we can do an IPA, and we'll see that we've now got an IP address, and we can confirm this by running an apt update, just a software update. We should see that we are now actually connected to the internet. Woohoo! And I'll just do a Control-C here because I'm not too bothered about finishing this. Now that we've got it connected to the internet, we can start to set up an SSH connection so that we can connect to it remotely. To create an SSH key on Linux and Mac, you would use the command ssh/keygen. Specify the type. The A means do 100 rounds of the cryptographic check. -C is a comment where you would label it ADP key, and -F means output it to a file. Here we're going to put this file in the SSH directory and name it ADP key. When we hit enter, it will ask us for a passphrase. We're going to leave this blank, and now it has generated an SSH key. We've got two files generated, so if we do cat ADP key, you'll see that we've got the private key and the public key. The public key is where we want to copy onto the ADP so that it can authenticate our private key. Now that we have a public key, we need to copy it over to the ADP3450. So we first copy this key and then reconnect to our ADP serial terminal. Now we connect to check that we are in the home directory. We can do this by with pwd or looking here and seeing the directory. Next, we will need to make sure that we have an SSH folder. So we don't have one yet, so we can do mkdir to make the directory. And then we can cd into the new directory. Now we need to make a file called authorized_keys. It's the American spelling. And we can paste that key that we got inside here. Okay, so this file has got the wrong permissions at the moment and it's too permissive, so we need to change those with this command chmod 600 authorized keys. If you do ls-la again to see the permissions, you'll see that it's now owned by Digilent and it's only read-write by Digilent and not by anybody else. We also need to change the permissions of the .ssh folder so that it's not readable or executable by other people. We can do this by chmod 700.ssh. And now it is only read-write executable by Digilent. We can do this by using ssh-copy-id. So here that's going to be at .ssh/adp key. And we provide the username Digilent at the IP address that we just found when we connected it to the internet. Then it will ask for the password. Now it shows that with the password Digilent, it's now added one key. You might have noticed that doesn't seem very secure. And now we've been able to connect to this remotely with the username and password of Digilent and Digilent, just the defaults. So we'll go back into the terminal of the ADP3450 and change this to be slightly more secure. So we've copied the key across to the ADP3450. We can now disable the password login. To do this, we change the settings of the ssh_config file. First, we type sudo and then an editor of your choice, /etc/ssh/ sshd_config. The password is, again, Digilent. Now we can scroll down to where it says authentication. We remove the root login, and if we scroll down further again, we can disable the password authentication. So first we need to disable with changing yes to no, and also uncomment the line there. Then we have the file in nano. Next we will need to restart SSH service, so we do that with sudo systemctl restart SSH. You can then see the status of this and see that it's active and running. Now if we try to SSH into the ADP3450 using just a username and password, we'll get permission denied because you require a public-private key pair to log in. We can specify this on the command line by giving the location of the key that we've just created with -i, using Digilent at the IP address we had before. If you're on Windows, you can do this in PuTTY by providing the key file inside PuTTY. We hit enter and we're greeted with our ADP3450 prompt. To access from the internet, the next thing we'll do is to do a config port forwarding from your router. For a guide on port forwarding, check out the walkthrough on my blog via the Digilent website. And there you have it, you've achieved remote access to the ADP3450. Now you can test any PCB from across the ocean. It's honestly a game changer for any electronics engineer who works remotely like me. Hope this helps. Thank you, bye, ma salama.